today to our monthly webinar series called QI Power Hour, which is open to individuals interested in health and healthcare improvement related topics. And it's a free webinar that occurs once per month. And today we're talking about land-based education, embracing the rhythms of the earth with Dr. Herman Michel. Sorry, I've got to advance the slide here. So we are here today during National Indigenous History Month and in advance of National Indigenous Peoples Day coming up on Tuesday, June 21st, to learn about and celebrate First Nations culture and teachings, and specifically to learn about land-based education and teachings. So it is important to me as the host of our gathering today and as an inhabitant of these treaty lands and as a descendant of European settlers to acknowledge the land that my feet are planted on today. So I am joining you from HQC's offices in Saskatoon, which is on Treaty 6 territory and the homeland of the Métis. Our organization also serves the entire area now known as Saskatchewan, which also includes lands that are part of Treaties 2, 4, 5, 8, and 10. And so today, remembering all of our obligations as treaty people in this province, I ask that we listen, learn, and respect the knowledge that's being shared about the land on which we live, work, and play, and that we respect, nurture, and support this land and all of the peoples who share it. As many of you know, or if you're new to joining us, our QI Power Hour sessions are recorded. So you can check out the recording of this session or any other sessions you may want to view on Health Quality Council's website. And while you're there, you can also sign up for the QI Power Hour email newsletter, and that will notify you of future sessions. And so you can do that on our website or click on the link in the slides. Just wanted to also acknowledge our audiences. So over the past several years, we've seen lots of growth in our audiences, both within Saskatchewan, as well as across Canada and around the world. So thank you for spending an hour of your time with us and for your commitment to ongoing learning to improve the systems that you're each a part of. We would love to see lots of engagement with the material today in the chat. So we are all muted, but you can enter questions, comments, ideas, reflections, thoughts, gratitude in the chat. And so if you're not familiar with that, there's a little speech bubble looking button in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. You can click on that and enter your comments into the chat. So please feel free to do so now and throughout the session. And I can also, take any questions from there if we have time at the end for some questions and discussion. So without further ado, I am pleased to welcome Dr. Herman Michel, who's been in the field of Indigenous education for many years. He's an advocate for the indigenization of schools and places of higher learning in the aftermath of residential schools. And he has expertise in land-based education, as well as bringing Western science and Indigenous ways of knowing together. He conducts Indigenous-based professional development workshops and is currently an external consultant for the Prince Albert Grand Council. And I've also had the pleasure of getting to know and working with him as part of the HQC Cultural Advisors Group. So I'm very excited to hear what you have to share today and looking forward to being able to see you in person when we gather in a week or so. So with that, I'll turn it over to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tracy, for the wonderful introduction this morning. Just a few technical difficulties, but I think we're on the go here. I have a PowerPoint that I am going to be sharing with you today, and I'll be speaking to the slides. And so this morning I wanted to talk to you about land-based education. Embracing the rhythm of the land. And this is actually a title of my latest book that has come out. And yeah, so let's see. So I can advance the slides myself, Tracy?
Yes, you can.
So a little bit about myself. I come from northern Saskatchewan. I come from a long line of land-based peoples from my region. And I'm actually in Treaty 10 territory, but I am speaking to you from Prince Albert, Saskatchewan this morning. We are the Woodland CREE and the Denistilian peoples, and I come from Reindeer Lake. It's one of the largest freshwater lakes in Canada. A little community called Kiniseo. It's a semi-remote community. And today I wanted to talk to you about, a little bit about my strong connection to the land. As you know, Indigenous peoples around the world share a very strong relationship with the land. We also have like a shared history with colonization and residential schools. And we also have a shared vision to reclaim our self-determination. And so with that, I'm just going to, so this is actually where I come from. Reindeer Lake is on the right side of that map. So you can see it's a huge lake. And both of my parents were trappers. So that's where I come from. I have really humble beginnings. This is the one-room schoolhouse that I started out my education. I am also a residential school survivor, and I have been educated in 4 universities in Canada. And so that's a little bit about who I am. One second here. So this is my book that has come out. It's about 3 years old now, and I have quite a few books. My publisher is John Charlton, Publishing Limited, out of Vernon, BC. He does have a website and also has a Facebook site, and so you'll see my books in those sites. So I wanted to begin this talk this morning about our shared worldview as Indigenous peoples around the world. We do the way in which we view the world is interdependent with the land and the natural world. And so it's a lens from which we view the world and how we experience life and how we make it meaningful. And so our worldview involves coming to understand our place within creation. And so it acts as a filter through which impressions of all entities and beings are ordered. And so this is a huge thing around land-based education. It's not a trend for us. It's a life-saving force. So I usually like to explain our worldview as like a circular kind of worldview. If you look at the nest on that slide, it's round. The birds and the bees make their nests in a circular way. The beaver lodge is a circle. Even their caribou migration is done in a circular kind of way, and the earth and the planets around, and even the raindrops, create circles within circles. And so in the Woodland CREE, from where I come from, we have 6 seasons instead of 4. We have the fall freeze up, and also the spring thaw. And we get certain things at certain times of the year. And so when I work with teachers today, I explain that because therein lies the framework from which we develop our activities on the land based on those 6 seasons. And so a little bit about our CREE history. We are an oral literate Algonquin language group where our relatives are the Naskapi, the Ojibwe, the Atikamekw, the Beothuk peoples in Canada, and there's 4 Cree groups. I am the Woodland Cree, and we also have the Plains Cree that's sort of south of the province of Saskatchewan. We also have the Swampy Cree, and then we also have the OG Cree, and so we're a rich, very rich cultural group. A little bit about the word Cree. It actually originates from a French word, Coristino. It's an Ojibwe name for a division of Cree speaking people south of the James Bay. And so the theory is that the Cree migrated from the east to the west to where we are now. And so the word Cree, K-R-I, then eventually became Cree. And so we are one of the largest and most widespread Indigenous groups in Canada. And so we have a very young population. So our next generation of nation builders are a huge group. And so our Cree culture is really strongly rooted in the lands that we occupy, and our Cree cultural lifeways are rooted in the land. Our worldview is rooted in the land. Our language is rooted in the land. Our Cree ways of knowing are rooted in the land. Our traditional teachings and our stories and our songs and our dances and ceremonies, they're all rooted in the land, and even the medicines that we use on our lands. And so everything about who we are is rooted in the lands and the lakes and the rivers that we occupy. And so I always explain that our Cree culture and our languages, they're inseparable. And so, so just a little bit of that. I'm sure that you have all heard about, the over 500 years of colonization, and of course we've had over 100 years of residential schooling in Canada, and of course we also have the day schools, that 60 school, and the child welfare system where our kids were taken away with very limited access to their cultures and their languages. And so there's the TRC report that came out, and explains that the reason why these schools exist was assimilation. And they use the word cultural genocide as well. And so there was a lot of systemic racism in the country at the height of the residential school system. And of course, we have the reservations as well, where we were pushed on into community settlements. And of course, we have the Indian Act that controls us from the womb to the tomb. And so we have a lot of, we've encountered and experienced a lot of historical trauma. And anywhere that you walk, say for example, downtown Prince Albert, or downtown Saskatoon, or downtown Winnipeg, or downtown Toronto, you'll see my people on the streets. And really horrible circumstances, and a lot of ill health. So this is all the result of everything that we have encountered in this country. And so So health and healing is a huge thing for us right now. In order to rebuild our nations, we need to go back to the land, and this is how the elders explain it. And so returning to the land is about, learning about who we are in this country. And when the residential schools closed down, the last one being 1996, so it hasn't been that long. And so when they were having the hearings, the residential school hearings, we kept hearing the elders say, we must go back to the land. We must reclaim who we are. We must go back to the rivers. We must go back to the waters. And so land-based education has been a big part of our cultural life since the beginning of time. And so this is the reason why I say it's not a trend for us. And so it's a huge movement right now across Canada. From small land-based excursions to multi-day kind of excursions. And so in the area of addictions, for example, is a huge movement. And so we take people out on the land with the elders and the mental health workers, and to be able to work with us, and so that we're able to constructively release some of the baggage that we have picked up along the way. And also, so it's really about decolonizing our spirit, decolonizing the spirit of the land. So that's what that means to me. And so there's a huge thing on trauma-informed healthcare right now because of our experiences with cultural genocide. And so for us, health is more than just a biological category. And so a trauma-informed approach to healthcare acknowledges that healthcare organizations and care teams need to have a complete picture of a patient's life situation, the past and the present, in order to provide effective healthcare services with a healing orientation. And so I know that in the healthcare system, we really focused a lot on the social health determinants of health, things like poverty, education, the need for housing, things like food security, and our continued encounters with systemic racism within the healthcare apparatus. And so I always, the teachers that I work with and the professionals that work, other professionals that work in our communities, I always say that you really need to have a very strong social, historical, political, economic, and our cultural realities of today. And so it takes a lot of active learning to be able to have that background. And I always tell the university students that if you are thinking of working with our communities, you really need to know our history. And I know in the education system, we're just now really starting to begin to talk about our own stories, the real history of who we are and what we have encountered. So the way in which we define health is quite different. And so I always say to healthcare workers that, that the definition of health is dependent, on the culture and the worldview and the paradigm of the definer. And so the concept of health is interpreted, it's idealized and enacted in different ways, depending on the culture from which it arises. So in other words, our experiences and our understandings of health and well-being are always historically and culturally mediated. And so there are different worldviews and beliefs that frame health knowledge and healing practices. So for us, it's not just about the physical health. For us, it's really about the four dimensions of our being. You know, speaking about mental health development, spiritual development, emotional development, and physical development. And so while we're doing that, it's also important to understand that it's about strengthening our families, strengthening our communities, and really building on everything that we have done within a very short period of time. You know, really looking at the strengths that we have in our communities. You know, there was a time when researchers, you know, thought of us from a deficit kind of, you know, point of view where we're all sick and dying, right? But we have a lot of success stories that are important to us. You know, we've shared a lot in this country. We have a lot of contributions that we have made in this country, and so it's really important to, you know, to raise that profile of everything that we have contributed. And so it's important because our young people need to understand that as well. Now, I see a time when, you know, young people, regardless of race and culture, will be walking together in this country hand in hand, you know, with the relationship, a positive relationship building, you know. So, and so just a little bit about our CREE knowledge systems. Like we have in education, we have these words that we use. You know, our CREE ontologies is actually our worldview and our understanding and our place in it. And we have our own epistemologies, meaning the way in which we perceive knowledge is quite different than the neurosettler understandings of how we perceive knowledge. And so for us, we not only learn from one another, but we also, you know, the animals and the land is also they're also teachers and they're also healers. And so we also have different ways of passing on knowledge or methodologies, and we have our own ways of teaching about these things. And so all of these are rooted in the lands and the lakes and the rivers. And so it's about embracing the rhythm of the earth, right? And so, yeah, so our concept of community extends to the natural world of which we are a part. We are inseparable from the lands that we occupy. And so today, I am involved in a research project right now on, Intertribal Health Authority, based out of Prince Albert. I am doing some research for them, and what they want to do is they want us, you know, a strategy of how our traditional medicines can be integrated into the health service delivery system. And when COVID hit, of course, everything shut down, right? So I'm back going out and interviewing people from northern Saskatchewan, and we did one focus group out of Larange. We gathered healers and medicine gatherers, and we brought them into a circle, and we asked them some questions about, you know, because long time ago we didn't have access to clinics or hospitals, and so the land was our pharmacy. And so I know today a lot of our First Nations people are demanding more treatment options, and so it's about bridging, you know, the Western science with our traditional healing orientations. And so we want to, you know, make sure that our people and our knowledge systems are given equal status, you know, medicines that we use and the healing practices. And so, you know, we want to make sure that we have a full-fledged, I don't know whether or not you're aware that in the Treaty 6 treaty document, they have the medicine chest clause.
And the way in which we interpret that medicine chest clause is a full range of treatment options. And so when I talk in that way, it's about a nation-to-nation existence where our knowledge systems are equal, are at par. And so that speaks to the importance of reconciliation, is that our knowledge systems be given equal status, and so the importance of land-based education. And so we have a lot of as you know, UNDRIP, the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, is now a big part of the system. It is an international instrument now, and so that is now with us, and so we need to breathe life
to UNDRIP. So this is what we're doing right now as we read nations. And so we've had a lot of studies done. We've had a lot of commissions. One of the biggest ones was in 1996, the Royal Commission on Aboriginal Peoples report. Had a lot of recommendations on how to rebuild. So it's important to revisit these huge, because they cost a lot of money. And the recommendations are really sound. They're very clear. They're like a blueprint of what we need. And so we even have the World Health Organization. Like in my research with the traditional medicine strategy, I didn't realize that the World Health Organization has had 3 traditional medicine strategies, and we have the current one right now. It came out in 2013, and so traditional medicine has a very long history. And of course, Canada is part of the World Health Organization, but I think lots of really good work in the country. We're far behind when it comes to the integration of traditional medicines, of course, health service delivery system. And so, yeah, and
I'm sorry to interrupt. Your audio is getting just a little bit quiet, at least for me. So you might need to just move a little bit closer to the computer. Sorry about that. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. I have a few more slides here. So yeah, the World Health Organization is also a place where you can check out, some of the work that has been done around traditional medicines. And so, the purpose of my research is to assist, our health service delivery organizations in northern Saskatchewan. So the Western Pacific region is one of the largest, areas, and they've really
done a lot of advanced work around the integration of traditional medicines. They have, things like legislations, they have regulations, they have policies, there's education for health workers, there's special training for traditional healers too, so that they understand, the health service delivery system in Canada and the way it is. And so a lot of information collection and sharing. They even have laboratory and clinical research that have been done, in the monitoring of adverse reactions, and of course the standardization of products and practices and practitioners. And so a lot of the work that we do within our communities are the whole thing is about community-based, community-led, community-driven types of practices, and so that's a huge thing for us. And so just to sum up, it's so important to embrace the rhythms of the earth. Like if there is anything that connects all of us, and that is the beat of the drum, and regardless of the race and culture or any other social markers, we've all heard the drum beat for 9 months inside our mothers, and so when we come into the world, it's the same rhythm that we hear out in the natural world. And so for us, it's about multiple-eyed seeing. I'm sure you've heard the two-eyed seeing approach. That concept came from the East, but I like this. For me, it's about multiple-eyed seeing. We want to make sure that our kids are able to walk through multiple worlds in pride, just really acknowledging the gifts, that our young people carry. And so for healthcare workers, the law of compassion is really important, the law of love, and the law of respecting other people's ways of knowing. And so for me, it's about a coming together time and understanding, that we have different knowledge systems for a reason. We were given certain obligations and responsibilities within our cultures from creation. And so I want to thank you all for listening to my presentation.
Thank you very much, and we're so grateful to have learned from you. So we have a little bit of time left. I'm just going to check, the chat and questions. If folks have either questions, we can have a little bit of time for that, or also just reflections. The question I might put out to folks is, what have you learned today, and what might you try in your daily practice, either as a healthcare provider or someone else working in the healthcare system or another system altogether? What might you try as a new way of integrating new ways of doing and new knowledge that you've learned about today, if you'd feel comfortable sharing that. So I'm just going to do a quick check of the chat here to see what's there. There are a couple of comments about the sound. I'm not sure if you can move a little closer, if there's anything you can do, but that last little bit was better. So maybe that will help. There is a question here. And so the question is, what healing practices are your people practicing to get over the post-residential school mental and physical trauma among the survivors?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things is the sharing
Circle methodology that we use. We come together in circles to constructively release in a safe manner of some of the emotional baggage that we have. We all have we've all had different experiences in the residential school system. And so that's one of the biggest things. And of course, we also have, the sweat lodge ceremonies that are really, really, really powerful. And they're a cleansing kind of ceremonies, and there are different types of sweat lodge ceremonies, and not everybody goes into the sweat lodges. For instance, people with diabetes, you have to be really careful, because the heat inside the lodge can affect your yeah. So the sharing circles, the sweat lodge ceremonies, and we have different things too, like being out on the land as well. Being away from the noisiness of and the chaos of, for instance, living in a city. At least out there, it's really peaceful. It's really tranquil. You can think, and you can be able to have conversations with the land. It goes far beyond than just going out canoeing, for instance. So we lived a very physical, active lifestyle a long time ago, and so that becomes really important, and it's healing in itself as well. When you're out there on the land, when you're doing all these physical types of activities. And we have different things as well that we do, like the beating, for instance, like what works for one person may not necessarily work for another person. And so, yeah.
Excellent. Thank you so much. We've had a few folks sharing in the chat, pardon me, about things they've learned and things they're taking away from the presentation. So I might just share some of those. Someone has shared they just learned about the 6 seasons and never knew about that. So thank you for sharing that. And I think for those of us who've lived in Saskatchewan, and particularly in northern Saskatchewan, those seasons can be different than maybe in other places. And here a comment about, a deeper appreciation for the importance of the land in healing, which you've just talked about. And the concept of the circular process or circular rhythm. And this person has shared, my sheep make nests in the straw in circles too before they birth. And that's fascinating. Thank you for sharing and, recognizing the importance of your work and wishing you well in that. There's a comment here about, the view to the future. And I think the promise of incorporating, the approaches that you've talked about today and reconnecting with the land and culture and ceremony will have on healing and health. And this person was nodding in the affirmative and agree with your truth, and that these sessions help to share that vision. Sorry, I'm just kind of scrolling through the comments here to see what questions folks have. So there's a question here, and this one we'll see what you think. So the question asks, have there been any positives from the residential schooling that have been brought forward and shared?
So there's always, it's important to understand our experiences with a balanced kind of perspective. And, like you have to understand the grand narrative of why these schools exist in the first place. But we also have success stories as well that came out of that system. We have a lot of, a lot of leaders now out there. We've had a lot of writers, that have emerged. We now have a lot of professionals within our communities, and so we've built capacity with like good capacity within a very short period of time. But we also, we're also experiencing, the trauma still, and of course, the unmarked burial sites, of course, send shockwaves across the country. Like a realization of the things that we encountered. Yeah, but we do have success stories, and that's really important because we need role models, and they're coming out of the woodwork now, and so yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, and recognizing the trauma and what you said about what the true purpose of those institutions and processes were, and the trauma that went with those experiences that are being felt to this day. There's a question here, and I'm not sure from whose but just what are some of the most frustrating things that people experience, First Nations people experience about the healthcare system that you may have learned about in your teachings and your work with communities?
It would be the systemic racism, like we some of our people are dying in the hospitals, and there's a lot of stories out there, people being mistreated, and the systemic racism. And there's a recent call out from Health Canada on doing projects to alleviate, some of the things that we face within the healthcare system. And we still have a long way to go, but we have a lot of really good people as well, that are working within the healthcare system. And I think, what's really important, because I am an educator, and the way in which we educate healthcare workers is a huge thing for me. And so I know that universities are they do have indigenization strategies now, and so it's becoming a really big thing. And so I see a time when that we will fix the system, because Canada is a really a mover and shaker, in a lot of areas, and so on a positive note.
Excellent. And as you were talking about, educating healthcare practitioners and I would say leaders as well, one thing that struck me while you were sharing your presentation as well is I think for those who might be feeling maybe frustrated with the way things are and wanting to do something different, there are things that we as individuals can do every day, and that's show compassion, that's show understanding, that's, pardon me, recognizing, learning about the history of Canada and the history of Indigenous people and the relationship between Canada and Indigenous people. So I think for those listening who might be working in systems and frustrated with how things are going, for those of us who can, there are things that we can do daily in our daily work to make a difference. I see something just popped up in the Q&A, so I'm just going to see what that is. So this comment talks about traditional, oh, I'm sorry, one just popped up while I was trying to read. Just one second. There we go. Traditional treatment systems must be revived along with cultural and spiritual revival of civilizations. Do you have any written documents or books on these healing processes and practices?
Well, so the first book that I ever wrote it's called Shattered Spirits in the Land of the Little Sticks, and that's a story of my residential school experiences. And in there, I try to explain, it's an educational tool, that book, so that people are aware, and it's an easy read. And so that was the first book that I wrote, just trying to explain, the systemic aspects of those institutions. And then I wrote another book called Reconciliation from an Indigenous Perspective, because it's such a huge topic. And I know people have different interpretations of what reconciliation means. For instance, for me, like, it wasn't a hunky-dory, a wedding, for instance, but we didn't have conciliation, right? It was conquest and conquering and displacement and all those things. And so, but for me, it's about reweaving the web of life, which is really, really, really important. I think Indigenous peoples around the world have a lot to offer the planet. We live in a dying planet. I mean, look at the climate crisis that we face. And we've been saying all along that we can't continue to do this. And we need to have a shift in thinking in terms of our relationship with the earth, because it is the oldest grandmother, and it's a life giver. And so, we face a lot of, for instance, wildfires up in northern Saskatchewan, the flooding and all these devastating kinds of things that are happening around the world. And so it does require a shift in thinking. And I think our healing ways are really important for us. Other people also benefit, from our healing orientations. So.
Thank you. There is a question here, and I wonder if others might be wondering about it too. And I'm not sure specifically sorry, I lost it, which concept on the slide that they're referring to, but maybe I'll interpret a little bit. So just asking if we could give some examples of, and I'm going to choose multiple-eyed seeing approach, because I wonder for those listening to the call, who may have been kind of educated in more Western system or Western-centric systems, who may have some relearning or unlearning to do, or learning about new ways of knowing and doing. Some examples of how folks might do that, or things they might change in how they work. And I'll put that to you, but I'll put that to everyone listening as well. If you want to give some examples of how you might have done that in your own work, someone listening might be, hear that and think that's something that they can do as well. But just wondering if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, so one of my areas of focus in my expertise is around bridging Western science and Indigenous knowledge systems. And like I'm talking from a non-binary kind of
Mm.
way, and because there are a lot of similarities between those two very powerful systems of knowledge. Like for instance, from where I come from, northern Saskatchewan, like we experimented, like we observed, we verified, like we have our own theories, like we have, these things. And so when I work with teachers, I always say, take small steps and start from the commonalities of those two knowledge systems, and really also concentrate on the distinctiveness of those knowledge systems. They're very powerful knowledge systems, and so the bridging needs to happen, and especially in the healthcare world, because like I say, our people are demanding more treatment options for some of the things that we're living, because it's about lived experience. So,
And I think those are things that we can all do is, listen, understand, and value lived experience. And just taking my healthcare quality improvement lens, for folks listening who think and work and talk about patient and family-centered care. I mean, to me, that's the essence of what that is understanding the person in front of you, their worldviews, what's important and what matters to them. And so I think that's a concept we can all relate to. And those are things we easily have the capability to do in our everyday interactions with people. We just have a couple of minutes left. Any further thoughts or reflections that folks would like to share? And I'm looking at both the chat and the Q&A, so you can enter in any one of those places. So I'm not seeing any further ones come forward, but I think what I am kind of getting from the ones that have been shared so far is that what you've shared with us today has caused, lots of people to think and to reflect, to take in some new ideas and think about how they might, apply those learnings and teachings to their lives and to their work, which I think is just so valuable. And I think that's coming through. And there's also lots of recognition and gratitude for you sharing with us today. So just want to express that both from myself, from Health Quality Council, and from our audience today. Oh, I just see a comment coming up, says, please come again. We'd love to hear you again. So I think your sharing today has been heard and much appreciated. I did see just one comment here, if you wouldn't mind doing one more question. So the question is, hi Herman, great presentation. I'm a CREE PhD student in history at the University of Saskatchewan, looking at the history of traditional medicines and practices in Northwest Saskatchewan, so Meadow Lake area. I would like to hear more about how the medicine chest clause of Treaty 6, oh, sorry, lost it, can include contemporary medical approaches. Do you see much progress being made in this area, and what more do you think can be done to advance this kind of approach? That's a long one.
yeah, so I think it goes back to the interpretation of that medicine chest clause. And so, at the signing of the treaties, so we have two groups of people that come from two different world views, and different ways of understanding those treaties. And so, you know, we've always had treaties even before contact. And an elder once said to me that the first treaty that we ever had was between us and the Creator. And so when we lifted up our pipes during a treaty signing, we took control of the narrative. And, you know, so our pipes are very strongly rooted to the lands. And so they're actually a symbol of our very strong connection to the giver of life. And so that was our first treaty. And so we have certain obligations and certain responsibilities that come, you know, with those original instructions. And all peoples around the world were given instructions as well. You know, some of us have lost our way, but I think, you know, it's a coming together time. And it's important to reclaim, you know, who we are, the essence of who we are, and why we exist on this planet. And an elder once said to me, we are the next teachers of the world. And I'm beginning to see that now. We have great historians coming out, you know, like they play a very, very important role in changing and shifting the narrative for what it has been and where we need to go with it, right? So yeah, lessons learned, right? So
Thank you so much. So just really appreciating the discussion and the questions. Unfortunately, we are nearing the end of our time, so we will have to move on and wrap up the session. But I think speaking for all of us listening today and those who may listen to the recording later, just very grateful for you coming today and sharing your learnings and your knowledge with us. And what I'm taking away is you know what you've got on the slide there, and what I can do in my everyday interactions with people, in my work, in my life, to listen, learn, understand, respect, and build bridges. That's one concept I've heard you say a lot is bridging, and I think that's something we all have the skills and capabilities to do every day. So I would encourage others to think about how you can incorporate that into your life and into your practice. So thank you so much for joining us today. So we just have.
thank you very much for having me.
Oh, absolutely. Okay, so we just have a couple of bits of information to share before we wrap up the session today. So Herman, we will be sharing with you a pair of I Love Quality Improvement socks as a small token of our thanks for joining us today. So you can expect to see those shortly. And for anyone listening who has information or knowledge or a project you'd like to share with the QI Power Hour community, we'd encourage you to reach out to us and share your idea. We'd love to have you as a QI Power Hour speaker. So please do so if you're interested in sharing with this community. When you leave the presentation today, there's a screen that looks something like this that will pop up. It's to take you to a survey, an evaluation survey. It's not you know a spam or a scam, so feel safe about clicking on the continue button. But we would love to hear your feedback about the session today, about what we've done well and what we can be doing better. We look at every comment and every survey and take that information and continuously improve our offering. So please do complete the survey, and we thank you for doing that in advance. And just a little teaser of what's up next in July. So we will be welcoming the Saskatchewan Seniors Mechanism and Saskatoon Council on Aging to talk about what matters to older adults, rethinking care for aging and older adults. So we look forward to seeing you again at that session. And so with that, I'll bid everyone farewell today. Thank you, Dr. Michelle, for joining us and sharing your wisdom. Thank you all for joining us today. And we hope that you take away some learnings from this session that you can start practicing in your everyday life. Take care, everybody.